Welcome back to the show. I'm Jenny McCarthy Wahlberg with Donnie Wahlberg.
Donald Wahlberg.
Donnie, what do I love to talk about? What do I watch videos? About 8 hours of video a day.
Aliens.
Yep, that's right. And of course, this topic and this book, I was like,
aliens.
Let's get Dr. Andrew Gallimore on my show. So the book is called Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies, and the Cosmic Game. The book is available out right now. I want to eat it. Hi, Dr. Andrew.
Hi, Jenny. How's it going?
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics, my favorite pastimes. Okay, so let's first begin with, because I love, psychedelic drugs and aliens, so you can imagine how happy I am. So the book is like a roadmap to bridging the communication gap from humans to aliens, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of trying to think, I kind of take, it's specifically related to DMT, of course, dimethyltryptamine. And obviously, as you're very well aware, people tend to reliably meet extremely powerful and intelligent alien beings when they smoke DMT. And I'm a neuroscientist and a pharmacologist, so I've been studying psychedelics for about 25 years now. And I'm really interested in trying to understand how it's possible for one of the simplest drugs in the plant kingdom to allow your brain to somehow communicate with beings that are not in this universe, but in an entirely different reality completely.
Right. I would imagine if we were more evolved in some way, we would be able to communicate, and some do, without DMT or without psychedelics. Have you basically, have you taken DMT?
No comment, but I think you kind of know the answer to that question.
Okay. So when people have this connection and they meet these aliens, because I've heard these stories also, are they meeting the same aliens? I know there's not just one type, but are there similar stories of like, hey, I saw this gray and he communicated, he said this. Are there collective stories from people, or are they all different?
That's what's most kind of fascinating for me. It's easy to say, oh, it's just hallucination. But when people come back and say, I met this type of alien or this type of entity, whether it's kind of a reptilian kind of being or often insectoids or the famous machine elf alien creatures that Terence McKenna used to talk about, people do seem to go to the same kind of places, describe the same environments, and often meet the same kind of beings repeatedly. And that's really hard to explain if it was just purely a figment of the brain's creativity. You would expect much wider variation. And there are a lot, as you say, there are a lot of different types of these beings, but they often fall into these kind of categories. And people do describe the same, not just the same types of aliens, but with the same characters as well. So the elves are always lively and mischievous and kind of playful, whereas the reptile ones, you've got to be a little bit careful around those because they can often be quite fearsome and people get eaten and raped by these kind of beings. So it's,
it's a little daunting. What happens in the brain that allows you to communicate with that dimension?
Yeah, that's the really interesting question, because to kind of understand this, you need to think a lot about, first of all, what is the brain normally doing when you're kind of enjoying your normal waking life? Your brain is really constructing a model of your environment. The world you live in is this model of the environment all the time, and it's modulated. So it's kind of tested against sensory information. So your brain is receiving patterns of sensory information from the environment all the time. Now, when you go into the DMT space, if the space does kind of exist, your brain still has to kind of construct a model of that space, which is what you experience, but it also has to somehow kind of switch the reality channel, if you like, and allow it to receive information from this other place. So when you're communicating with alien beings from this other place, wherever it is, what needs to happen is your brain somehow needs to retune itself temporarily, essentially, to allow it to actually receive information from this alternate reality. And that's really what the book is about, is trying to explain how can that happen? How is it possible that this simple drug can actually allow your brain to essentially switch the reality channel, really, and immerse you, thrust you into an entirely new reality where these incredibly intelligent beings reside?
So in the book, by the way, Alien Information Theory, you explain that. You figured it out.
Yes, kind of, yes.
The one question I want to ask is, the brain is really large and we use so little of it. Is that part of what's happening? Like, so, Jenny shows me a lot of videos and a lot of stuff, of how, as we enter different vibrations or, higher levels of consciousness, we can connect to what else is out there. Is part of it the fact that we have so much brain that we don't use, or is that just useless, like protein? Like, is it just useless protein, or is part of that brain, that untapped elements of our brain, something that's keeping us from connecting amongst each other, sort of telepathically, and amongst, different dimensions of life that might be out there?
Well, I mean, this idea that you're only using 10% of your brain, it's almost
wrong?
a myth.
I mean, help me understand.
Yeah. So if basically you're using really all of your brain, but not necessarily all of your brain all of the time. So if you put somebody in like an MRI scanner and measure their brain activity, you will see kind of imagine a switchboard, right? Where you've got, let's say, a million lights, and some of, you're using all of them, but they're not all on at the same time, and they're kind of flashing, right? And generating patterns of information. That's really what your brain is. You can think of your brain as this massive switchboard, not full of lights, but it's very similar things to lights, these little pieces, little column-like structures that kind of switch on and off. They're all connected to each other. And your brain generates patterns of information by switching these little kind of lights on and off in a very specific pattern. And that actually, interestingly, is that information that generates is the world that you experience. You experience a model of reality, a model of the environment built from information. And what I think is happening is that when you take DMT, is the information changes. And the information is really, it dictates the type of the information the brain generates dictates the kind of information that it can receive. And so it's just like when you turn the dial on one of those old radios. First of all, it kind of crackles out of tune as the radio kind of stops receiving a particular frequency of electromagnetic radio waves. And then if you keep turning it, it kind of, this new channel kind of crackles into through the speakers, and you kind of hear this brand new channel. That is kind of, not quite the same, kind of how I think DMT is working in the brain. It's changing the information that the brain generates such that it can start absorbing information from this entirely different reality that's filled with these alien intelligences.
That's a great explanation. By the way, for those that are like, oh, DMT, what the fuck is that? It's a drug, and it's taken, usually I hear like through smoking. You have to do 3 big inhales, and it only lasts for like a few minutes.
Yeah, so DMT, dimethyltryptamine, to give it its full name, it's the most common naturally occurring psychedelic drug. It's everywhere. You look out your window, you can probably see half a dozen plants that contain DMT, if not more. And it's the simplest psychedelic drug in the plant kingdom.
She's going to start rummaging through the vegetation outside and smoke this shit. What are you doing to me, Dr. Andrew? What are you doing to me,
I'm saving my last question of where to get it at the end, but please continue. You're
killing me right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I see DMT, and you're right. It lasts for like 3 or 4 minutes. You isolate it from the plant, you vaporize it. Normally, there are other ways to take it, which we can talk about. It lasts for 3 or 4 minutes. You're fired into this entirely new reality filled with these intelligent beings. And then 3 or 4 minutes later, you're popped out again, and you're back in the normal waking world thinking, what the fuck just happened to me? And and it's like, how is this possible? Why is this drug everywhere? It's like this message. I see it as like a message from the cosmos that's saying, hey, do you get it yet? We're leaving this message. It's everywhere for you to find. Why don't you get the fucking the message that we're trying to leave? And I see us as being the species that is finally discovered the message, and we're now learning to kind of decode it using this DMT technology that's been kind of embedded everywhere. It's taken us, millions of years, really.
A long time.
To get the message.
The messages that are coming through to people from aliens, is it constructive criticism? Is it prophecy? What is it?
Well, it varies. I mean, I would say 80% of the time when people go into this space, even though they communicate with these beings, they come out and they rave for 2 or 3 minutes. That was impossible. This was the most crazy experience. I spoke to this and that, and then it all goes and they lose it. It slips through your fingers like a particularly traumatic dream. And it takes a lot of experience to be able to kind of bring information back. And part of the problem with that is that the DMT state, it is such a short-lived experience. Once you get in there and kind of orient yourself, you're already on the way back. So just as you're about to establish communication with these aliens, normally you're being dragged back again. And it's so I actually worked with Dr. Rick Strassman, who I'm sure you're familiar with, to develop a technology. It's called target-controlled intravenous infusion, which is the same technology that anesthesiologists use to keep someone in an unconscious state, basically by slowly infusing the drug into their veins at a very precisely controlled rate. So the level of drug in the brain remains constant, and you can do that with DMT, because one of the remarkable properties of DMT is it doesn't have tolerance. So you can inject someone with DMT, they will have an experience, then you can inject them maybe 15, 20 minutes later with the same amount of DMT, and they will have exactly the same intensity of experience. So you can continuously give the drug into someone's vascular system, into their veins, and actually keep the level of DMT in their brains constant, so they can stay within the space for hours, days.
Okay, how do I sign up for that?
That's what everybody says. Yeah,
I know.
I mean,
Why?
So it's the IV one. When I read the study, I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. But it was a study, and then it was no longer. And I'm like, well, fuck, are they still doing it? Are they going to start maybe putting it as microdosing for therapy? I'm not sure if aliens would be considered. Talking aliens would be considered that. But does anyone do the IV form anymore? It was just to prove something.
So the IV, the last time it was done in a well, it's been done a few times, but Rick Strassman used IV with his very famous study back in the 90s. But he used like a 30-second infusion basically to bring the levels up, and then allowed the levels to drop. So that was just a normal 5, 6, 7 minute experience. But this kind of continuous intravenous infusion is kind of a really at least a mathematically informed version of this is actually kind of new. And it was mine and Rick's idea, really, to actually develop this. But it's now being more formally developed by at least 2 groups across the world. So I expect in the next couple of years for this to be ready. Basically, it's not really ready for humans yet, because it's quite technical, keeping the level of DMT in someone's brain constant. There's a lot of variables and parameters that need to be sorted out because everybody's different. So the idea that you can lie down on a table and just sort of plug some kind of journey time into a machine, what I call the D-matrix machine, that's coming. But it's not ready yet. So in the future, I think these are sort of things you're gonna purchase off the internet, and you can use them at home. But that's my vision for the future. And then you're just gonna lie down. You'll insert a cannula into your arm, and then you'll just say 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. You can set the depth so you can know how deep you want to go, whether you want to go full in, break through, or whether you want to kind of skim across the surface. All of this will be there, and so it will really democratized DMT. I mean, DMT is a very democratic drug, and pretty much anybody can find it. Anyone can extract it.
Yeah, apparently we can find it in the front lawn, and she's going to go out looking for it tonight.
No, I won't. I want to do it that way. I'm willing to wait. You know, when I heard you were going to be on my show, I'm like, I'm going to ask him because I know it's got to be in the works. I can't be the only one that is this interested in wanting to do it that way. So if you need a test study for that, just you know who to call. Now, there's people that I know who I've met and talked to that have been on the show even that have talked with aliens without DMT. Have you met and talked to those type of people and then compared them to the ones with DMT?
A very small number, but I certainly am familiar with kind of the alien communication literature to some extent. And what's kind of interesting is a lot of the parallels between the experiences. There are certain types of aliens people will often talk about meeting, you know, particularly kind of reptilian and insectoid kind of aliens, that people who don't smoke DMT, if they're abducted, for example, they will sometimes describe meeting these kind of aliens, the similar kind of aliens that you meet in the DMT space. Now, one thing you don't tend to see with in the DMT state is the classic gray alien, kind of bit like me, I guess. You don't tend to see those in the DMT state. And it's my kind of theory or idea that perhaps that if the, as many people claim, if the gray alien shape is kind of a very tight-fitting suit of some kind,
right,
which I've heard many people say, that maybe in the DMT space, you might well be interacting with the same species, but they will be kind of naked, so to speak. So you wouldn't quite necessarily know you're interacting with the same species. But, you know, I'm not sure. It's also possible, and John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist who studied alien abduction, you know, he took it very seriously. He did hypnotic regression with a lot of alien abductees. And he suggested perhaps that the aliens weren't literally coming into people's bedrooms and taking them, but perhaps that they were somehow changing the consciousness of the abductees and allowing them to communicate with where the aliens are from. And that, to me, that screams, you know, DMT. You know, if these aliens are using some kind of chemical or some other related technology to actually change the brain temporarily of the abductee, so that they can then bring them in to their world temporarily. That might make sense.
That actually makes a lot of sense to me. Why? You know, usually I've done so much acid, it's crazy, and have, you know, become one with all the trees and the sky around me. But for the one thing that freaks me out is hearing the people meet the reptilians. Do you have control in your DMT trip to put an intention out there to say, like, I only want to meet with high vibrational beings?
Yes, for sure. And in fact, you know, I don't want to scare people, because the vast majority of the time when you meet an entity in the DMT space, it's going to be benevolent. People often meet the same kind of guides every time they go into the DMT space. They will either be very, very kind and really just want to show you around, or sometimes they're like really excited to see you, particularly the elves. The elves will often go wild, and they like bells and the lights flashing, and it's like, woo, like a huge party, a huge celebration when you kind of burst into that space. Very rarely do you get kind of nasty nasty entities, but they do exist. And yes, you can, people can learn to kind of, as you say, use some kind of intention and avoid these kind of entities. If you go in if you're fearful, they will often take advantage of that and know that they can scare you. And that's all they're doing. Remember, is they're only scaring you. You're not actually in any danger. And that's something you have to also try and keep in your mind, is that they can't hurt you. They will try to scare the fucking shit out of you, but that's all they're doing. And so you can fight back. You can say, I don't, you remember Freddy Krueger, and you had to kind of say, I don't believe in you. You're not real, right?
Right.
Back in the day.
Which I've done in my dreams, when I've had some weird, growing up Catholic and learning about demons, I'd face them in my dreams and be like, you can't overtake me. And then I'd win.
Yeah.
Like when there was a spirit in our house.
Yeah.
And she walked by it. Listen, I don't do drugs.
I wasn't on drugs.
No, I know. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke weed even. I might have to try the DMT with her because I can't let her go meet aliens without me. But she's good like that. Like there was a spirit. I don't see ghosts, but I saw it. And I woke up. I said, "Do you see that on the wall?" It was like a shadowy,
it's like a shadow person
entity, like in the movie Ghost. Whenever the demony things would come pull people to hell, it was like that kind of entity. And I said, "Do you see that?" She said, "I see it. It was on the wall." And she walked by it towards the bathroom and said, "If you're not of the light, you have to leave." And I watched her walk by, and I looked back, and it was gone. It listened.
Wow.
That's because
I wasn't on DMT either.
Because I'm telling you,
sorry for derailing the conversation.
It's true. It's like all my Catholic, fear experiences led me to maybe this DMT moment I've been dying to have, because all I read about is, the astral plane and, try to astral project at night. Do you think that's the same plane that people go to? I'm calling it plane, dimension. I'm not even sure what to call, but is it that astral out of body place, or is it a different dimension?
Yeah, it's kind of it's hard to know, and this is something I'm really interested in. What I think is that we live in a very thin slice of a much larger reality. You kind of imagine a reality as a cube, and we're kind of one square slice of that cube, and the reality is kind of stacked up. So we're like a two-dimensional slice of a three-dimensional cube. Now imagine we're like a three-dimensional slice of a 9 or 10 or 15-dimensional system. And you might be getting a little bit closer. I think the DMT space is clearly, in my opinion, much older, much bigger, much more complex. It's impossible from our perspective. People will describe going into places that seem to be literally impossible, higher dimensional places where there are more dimensions than exist in our reality, where they see all sides of objects at once. Elves will sing 9-dimensional objects into existence. These are not places that are simply, it's not like you're going to another planet. You're going to a place that is right next to us. We're right there. We're kind of sitting in this little slice of this vastly more complex system that I think has been around for a lot longer than our piddly little universe has. And that's what you're interacting with. So it's hard to know. It's like the DMT space, it's so vast and complex and difficult even to comprehend, that it's hard to make sense of what the relationship is. That's what I try to do in the book, is try to give people an intuitive understanding of how it might work. I mean, imagine being on a flatland world and then suddenly bursting into three-dimensional space and seeing spheres and cubes. You would go, what? That was, and then you would come back and go, I just saw something that is impossible. I saw
and trying to explain it.
Right, and you would. That's what's happening when people smoke DMT. Is they're going into this higher dimensional reality, and then they're coming back and trying to form a memory in their brain of some place that's impossible, and you can't do it. So, you have to learn to be able to kind of download a lower dimensional version of your experience to try to explain it to somebody. Yeah,
that makes total sense. Now, the question I think that anyone that's listening right now that might be asking is, what the fuck is the benefit? What do you get out of it?
Well, I mean, it's like, what's the benefit of climbing Everest, or what's the benefit of astronomy? What's the benefit of cosmology? It's about, I feel like humans are a curious species. We're driven towards deepening our understanding. And DMT to me is the ultimate. It's far more exciting than sticking a telescope towards the heavens.
Way.
This is, we are literally, in my opinion, people will disagree with me on this, but you are literally establishing two-way communication with alien species that not only don't exist within this universe, not only don't exist within our solar system, but are actually from an entirely different reality, and completely a higher dimensional, hyperdimensional bizarre alien reality, and we can communicate with them. If that's not the most astonishing discovery in the history of the human race that we need to explore and work out what the fuck is going on, then what is? To me, it's the ultimate version of exploration, to go to another reality. Simply, anyone can do it. Literally, anybody in the world can go to this place. This is not just for people who go through 6 years of training at NASA or whatever. Anybody. And that's the beautiful thing about it. It's a completely democratic drug. And at the same time, it's the most astonishing and powerful and unbelievably remarkable experience that any human can have, in my opinion.
Right. And just like, acid, which Eckhart Tolle, who's a guru that I love, talked about when he took acid and how it actually expanded his mind. He felt it, and it's interesting because when something expands your mind like that, you're able to have different perspectives. Your little problem seems so fucking little, So by expanding that scope, I think these experiences can help you in your life by seeing a bigger picture. We're not just this little me and this little problem. There's so much more to be explored, to go within, because those, universes are within us. And that's what we do. We take it and we go and experience it. I have that same passion as you. And so I'm really grateful that we have someone like you that's out there figuring it all out. Dr. Andrew Gallimore, will you please come back and talk more about this, especially as you learn more and experiment more? The book, though, I cannot wait to read this book, Alien Information Theory. You guys pick it up right now, Psychedelic Drug Technologies and the Cosmic Game. I might be calling you later to find out where you get some DMT.
No. Just get me some safe version of it so I can join her to visit the alien, but I get paranoid. I might never come back.
You'll come back, don't worry.
I might stay on Krypton.
Everyone will come back. Alien Information Therapy. Dr. Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jenny.